Hello everyone, in today's class we will talk about the mode of transmission of the parasites and the method of dissemination of the infective stage of the parasite. Here in the first instance, before going to the subject, I would like to mention that the parasite, they are quite an unique organisms as compared to lower organisms like bacteria and viruses, and as in comparison with two higher organisms like human beings or mammalians or vertebrates, other reptilian vertebrates and all this. Okay, so that if you see the evolutionary pattern of the organism, the older the parasites or the parasites which are more successful in the or in completing the life cycle are the one which is causing lesser pathogenesis. These things I have written down in your notes that in the pathogenesis is very much related to the ages of the parasites. Okay, the more successful one are those which are, I'm repeating, the more successful one are those which are causing minimal pathogenesis. Because here, one thing I would like to say is that they are eukaryotic organisms, unlike bacteria and viruses, they require some host to live on, they require some host to live in. That is why when if they kill their host or if they cause severe pathogenesis to their host, that will cause a problem of their own. Okay, so they want to have a strategy of live and let live. If I cut down let's say if parasites have cut down their pathogenesis, or if they can reduce their pathogenesis, that that they cause lesser pathogenesis to their host. That means the pathogenic effect of the parasite in the host is reduced. Then the parasites as well as the host would survive together. So this is their mode of their strategy in uh, for the completion of their cycles. One thing. Another thing is that they are very so in the process of developing, in the process of completing their life cycle, there is one system that is really important. That is their reproductive organs or reproductive system is very much developed as compared to other systems like their alimentary canal, which is many a times in case of tapeworms, it is very primitive. There is practically no alimentary canal. In case of trematodes, there is some blind ceca without an anal opening. And if you see a bit higher organism in case of a nematode, there is, of course, there is oral opening and also there is posterior anal opening. So these are very simple, very simple structures. Okay, so as compared to the reproductive organs, the alimentary canal, I mean the digestive system, the nervous system, the muscular system, the excretory system, they are very simple, but the reproductive organ is quite developed. First one. Okay, so the parasites are transmitted in various ways depending on the nature of the parasite. Some parasites are uh, transmitted from one host to another host without the requirement of any other host. If that means that the nature of the parasite life cycle is a direct life cycle. We know that, and some parasites, they are disseminated by other hosts. They are disseminated by other hosts. That is, we know that that means those parasites, those hosts which disseminated the infective stages of the parasite could be the uh, intermediate host. That means they are carrying the intermediate stages of the parasites. Okay, so in helminthology class, we will be studying. There are three groups of parasites that we are going to study. One is the parasites which belongs to nemathelminthes. Okay, nemathelminths. So these are mostly known as nematode. Okay, these are commonly known as roundworm. Another one is platyhelminths. So under this platyhelminth, there are two groups that we will be studying. Those are, number one is cestode. In cestode also there could be two. All these things elaborately we'll talk about. And another one is trematodes, which are a fluke. Okay, so the first one which we will be discussing now is nematodes. The nematodes are actually, they are roundworms. Okay, so they could complete their life cycle by direct. That means without the requirement of a single type of host. That means if there is a pig, it will transmit only to pig. It will not transmit. I mean, it will doesn't require any other medium from one type of host to another type of host. Okay, and another one is indirect life cycle. Okay, so in this way, in this indirect life cycle, it might be required for more than one type of host. Let me give an example. Elephantiasis, that we know that from human being to another human being, the transmission is propagated by mosquitoes. So in between that one type of host, that means human being is a type of one type of host, and another human being is a same host. Okay, so between human beings, it is transmitted by mosquitoes. So this is an indirect life cycle. Okay. Now another point is usually nematodes or any other parasites doesn't which completes their life cycle by direct life cycle, which completes their life history by direct life cycle. That means with requiring on a very minimum number of hosts, they would lay more number of eggs as compared to those parasites which require an intermediate host. Okay, why it is so? In case of Ascaris, if you see, the number of eggs are up to 20 legs per day. But whereas in case of Fasciella, the number of eggs are about only 4,000 to 6,000 number of eggs. Because here in case of Fasciella, they have the intermediate host. So when they have the intermediate host, these intermediate hosts are going to propagate for them. Okay, so if there is someone to propagate for them, why to spend so much energy or so much energy and resources in laying so many number of eggs? But whereas in case of an Ascaris swarm, okay, which is having a direct life cycle, it, as it does not have any other host, so that it any other host to propagate the infection in the environment or in the subsequent host, so they would spend most of their energy and most of their resources in laying eggs. Okay, the next point what we have to discuss is there are three types of eggs, especially in case of nematode. One is, I would like to say from here, from the viviparas. Okay, so what are those viviparas? Viviparas are those which give birth to a larva. Okay, so what are those? These are filarial ones, the Dirophilaria, Amitis, Wuchereria, Bancrofti, and all those which are very, very important in case of human being. Another one is ovoviviparous. Okay, so viviparous, we know that this is laying of a larva. Ovo means the larva is contained within the egg shell. What are those? This Strongyle, this Stylocoralis. Number three is the oviparous. What are those? That means these are the one which contains unembryonated or embryonated eggs, but not a larva. Okay, this is just an embryo. All right. So let's see what are the direct life cycle in case of a nematode which lays oviparous egg. Okay, so here do not get confused or do not get intimidated by the number of arrows here I put. Okay, so this is very, very simple one. Okay, when there is an adult, that means the host is definitive host. When there is an adult parasite, the host is naturally a definitive host. Okay, so inside the definitive host, the adult will, for completion of its life cycle, what is the next stage? Adult means the next stage of an adult is young one. That means the egg. The egg is laid and the egg embryonated in the environment. It will develop into, in case of nematode, we used to call L1, larva 2, and larva 3. Usually, larva 3 is the infective stage in a nematode, which will enter in the definitive host. Okay, where there will be formation of an adult, it will turn into L4 and L5. Very, very simple. Very, very simple. Okay, so this is the pictorial diagram of the life cycle of a Ascaris swarm. Okay, so this is the oviparous egg. Okay, so here actually there are two types of oviparous egg. One is those which does not have any segmented embryo within the eggshell. This is the eggshell and this is the embryo. Okay, so this is the eggshell and this is the embryo. It does not have any segmentation of the embryo. It is just a simple or single embryonic mass in case of an ascaris, whereas in case of strongyle, so the, of course there is a no larva, but there is a embryo, but which is already segmented. Both the type of eggs are known as oviparous egg. Okay, next is those parasites which laid the egg containing larva. Okay, this is very bit quite similar with the previous one. Here also the egg containing larva will be laid by the adult parasite. Then subsequently it will lay L1, L2, L3. It will develop into L1, L2, L3. L3 is the infective stage. It will enter. It's very simple one. Okay. Here this is the schematic diagram of Strongyle. Okay, this is the ovoviviparous. The larva develop within a very, very thin eggshell. Okay, so the larva will hatch in the environment. It will develop into the egg will hatch in the environment. I mean to say that it will develop into larva 1, larva 2, larva 3, and it will enter into the host, and all these uh, elaborately we will talk about when we go to the systemics part. Okay, so for now on it will be required for you to know that the eggshell the thin eggshell contain the larva which is laid at the time of laying of the by the adult parasite. It will develop into L1, L2, L3, and it will enter on the host. Okay, another one is those parasites which laid a larva or which give birth to a larva. Okay, here usually those parasites, not all, but one thing you must remember is when we talk about life science, it is a science of exception. There is no hard and fast rule that it should be or it must be. Okay, there is always a flexibility is there. Okay, so the adult parasite give birth to a larva. This larva is taken up, especially let me give an example for um, filarial worm, which are transmitted by mosquitoes, Useria bancrofti, or okay. So the larva one is circulated in the bloodstream. So when the larva is circulated in the bloodstream, mosquito drink blood or drink blood, and it will inside the mosquito it will develop into L2, and subsequently it will develop into the infective stage L3. And when mosquito bites to another host, and it will inject this L3 into the host, and subsequently it will develop into L4, L5, and completes the life cycle. This is how the life cycle completes, especially in case of filarial worm. Okay, so this is the schematic diagram representation. Okay, inside this dog, there will be development or there will be circulation of L 1. Okay, so when L1 is ingested by mosquitoes, it will develop into L2 and it will develop subsequently into L3. When mosquito trying to bite another dog or the same dog, it will inject the L3 into the dog, and subsequently in this dog it will develop into a male as well as the female adult parasite, and which will subsequently give birth to the next generation. That means the larva. Okay, so it's very simple one. Okay, the same thing. This is also another schematic diagram. Okay, of Angias Strongylus contonensis, which is the red worm of red lungworm. Okay, lungworm of red, which give birth to a larva, or sometimes it may laid an egg which hatch in the lung itself, and the fecal material will inside in the fecal material, and L1 will be passed. And when L1 is passed in the environment, certain land snail and slugs and all these, they will ingest the larva one, and inside the larva one, L2 L3 will develop. So L3 will exit in the uh, from the slugs, and it could enter through the slime of it. I mean, the L3, the larva stage 3, could come out in the slime or in the excrement of a snail. Subsequently, if it contaminated vegetables like broccoli, like your carrot, like your dhania, and all this, and if we happen to ingest in human being, there is a very serious disease that is caused eosinophilic meningitis that could cause, or sometimes this larva itself might enter into the definitive host where there is mm, adult parasites develop, and subsequently the life cycle completes. So this is how the parasite completes its life cycle. Okay, coming to trematodes, which are also known as flukes. Okay, most of the trematodes are having an indirect life cycle, except very few which are not of veterinary importance or veterinary or medical importance. These are mostly those trematodes uh, which are having a direct life cycle are mostly the trematodes of fish. Okay, so here, just like the previous one, the definitive host will contain the adult parasites and which will lay eggs. Okay, so when the egg comes in the environment, okay, the larva develop inside the egg shell is known as miracidium. We call it as miracidium. And so when miracidium enters on the intermediate host, it will develop into certain intermediate states like sporosis, like radia, like cercaria. Okay, so when cercaria escape in the environment, it will encysted. Okay, so the encysted form of a cercaria is known as metacercaria. Okay, the metacercaria is known as, or it is the infective stage of a trematode. I will just show you right now here. Okay, so this is the pictorial representation of fasciella gigantica or fasciella hepatica, we might say. Okay, here in sheep, the adult parasites resides in the bile duct. Okay, so the egg comes through bile and it is passed out in the fecal material. It is the egg is, there is an embryo that is developing, and in after 2 weeks it will develop, the embryonic mass will develop into the first stage known as miracidium. So when the miracidium subsequently it will enter on the snail, okay, it will develop into sporosis and radia. All these things elaborately I'll talk about later on. Okay, and subsequently the tail cercaria will develop, and when the cercaria exit from the snail, it will encysted. Okay, the encysted form is known as metacercaria. This is the infective stage, and if in plants or in water, drinking water, if this definitive host happen to ingest the metacercaria, the life cycle completes. So this is the general life cycle of a trematode. Now coming to the indirect life cycle of cestodes. Okay, so there are two groups of cestode. One is Eucystoda and another is Cotyloda. All these characters we will talk about later on. Okay, for now on, what we must remember is the definitive host carries the adult parasite which lay eggs. The larval stage, just like which is comparable to the miracidium, is known as oncosphere. And okay, so when the oncosphere enters on the intermediate host, it it develop into different metacystode stage. Okay, cystode, metacystode stage. All right. So these metacystode stage, they are they will develop into the intermediate host. All right. So when the intermediate host is ingested by the definitive host, the cycle completes. Okay, it's a very simple one. But one thing that is one we must remember. One thing that we must remember is here in this case, in case of cystic which is called, you might have heard in your pathology class also, that the human being is the definitive host of Taenia solium. Okay, so in the environment, in the human stool, the egg comes out, the oncosphere comes out in the environment, within the eggshell, and it will enter on the intermediate host in case of pig. Okay, so the pig will develop uh, cysticercas in its tissue, in the muscle especially, or sometimes human being can also develop cysticercas. uh, okay, all these details we will talk about later on. Okay, so here the definitive host, I mean the intermediate host, if human being consume, and the life cycle could complete. Okay, another one is here in this case, I would just like to go back here. In this case, it requires only one type of intermediate host. But in case of Cotyloda, which are known as fish tapeworm, okay, so here the adult parasites resides in the definitive host. The oncosphere comes and it will develop into first metacystode, and it will subsequently develop into the second metacystode. All these first, what are the metacystode of Eucystoda, or what are the metacystode of Cotyloda? These things we will talk about in subsequent classes, or everything in detail I will talk about. Okay, for now on, as it is the class for just for the um, modes of transmission and how the parasite is completing its life cycle. So I'm just going in brief only. Okay, so from the definitive host, the from the definitive host, the oncosphere comes and it will develop into first metacystode and second metacystode, and subsequently the second metacystode is consumed or eaten by the definitive host, and the cycle completes. Okay, so this is what happened. Okay, man is the definitive host, and in the fecal material, the egg comes out, and the oncosphere develop in the environment. It will enter on the first metacyst, first intermediate host, where it will develop into first metacystode, and subsequently it will enter into the second intermediate host, where the second metacystode will develop. And after that, if the definitive host consume, or if the definitive host eat the second intermediate host, then the cycle completes. So this is how the cycle completes in case of uh, Cotyloda. Okay, now coming to um, Protozoa. Okay, so Protozoa here also, Protozoa also transmitted both in heterogeneous or monogeneous life cycle. Here it is very simple, just like the first one what we have discussed, like the direct life cycle of oviparous. The host, inside the host there will be inside the definitive host there will be production of adult, there will be production of sexual states, there is male and female gametes, and the oocyst after fertilization, when male and female gametes they fertilize to each other, they will develop into a oocyst. When the oocyst is escaping in the environment, there will be the embryonic mass that contained within the oocyst wall. It will divide subsequently, and it will subsequently enter into the host, developing certain stages. All these things we will talk about later on. Okay, so this is the life cycle of the coccidia. Kettle is the definitive host. Inside kettle, there will be sexual stages of the parasite, and it will develop into when they reach fertilization. After fertilization, it will develop into a oocyst. The oocyst will embryonate in the environment, developing into certain stage, and when entering on the definitive host, and it will undergo certain stages like sporogony, uh, zygogony or endogeny. All these things we'll talk about in protozoology class. Okay, so the last one is indirect life cycle of a protozoa. Here also, just like the previous one, the host will develop male and female gametocytes, and subsequently the the intermediate host will ingest the zygosome, and the intermediate host will ingest certain stages of the parasite, and mostly what are those intermediate hosts? These are mostly the arthropods. Okay, arthropods like mosquitoes, like ticks. Okay, so when ticks and mosquitoes they ingest the male or female gametocyte, there will be fertilization. Male, female, and male will fertilize each other uh, in the in the intermediate host, and subsequently the infective stage will be produced, and which will be injected into the susceptible host. So this way the parasites they are completing their life cycle. Okay, so this is what happened. Okay, in case of, and this is the host. Okay, inside the host there will be development of male and female gametocytes. So once tick ingests, it will develop into uh, it will the male and female gametocytes they will fertilize each other, they will develop into a zygote. So inside the salivary gland of a tick, they will develop into the sporozoid, which is the infective stages of a protozoa. Then this sporozoid is subsequently injected into cattle, and thereby completing their life cycle. Okay, so one thing what uh, in the conclusion I would like to say is, I'm not going to ask, or people are not going to ask you what is the general life cycle pattern and all this. But if you do not know the general life cycle pattern, it will be difficult for you to understand each and every life cycle. Okay, if you understand the life cycle, okay, the general life cycle pattern, and it will be very easy for you to understand the pathogenesis. Understanding of the pathogenesis will help you understanding the clinical manifestation. Okay, understanding the clinical manifestation and understanding the parasites biology will help you the treatment regimen. Okay, so each and every steps that the class we are taking, and they are all important, and they are means one is important for the another, and subsequently it will come. Okay, so you might not able to grasp everything right now, but later on when we go to the systemic part, it will be very easy. For now on, this will be enough. Thank you.